Let's take a look at concept question 3.10 from chapter 10. And just for your reference, the textbook pages that deal with this situation are 231 and following. So it starts on 231 and then continues after that. So we're told here that we have an economy in long-run equilibrium with a real GDP of $4 trillion. And we're to suppose that the productive capacity of the economy increases by 50%, and at the same time the money supply increases at the same rate. And we're to use the drawing tool, possibly twice, to show the effect on the economy and label the new line. And then after that, use the point drawing tool to show the new equilibrium price, level, and output, and label that E2. So I'm going to magnify our graph here so we can look at it more closely. And what we have here are the long-run aggregate supply curve as well as the aggregate demand curve. So these are supply and demand in the overall economy for the long run. And as always, the equilibrium is at the point where the supply and demand curves intersect. So it's here at a price level of 100 and a GDP of $4 trillion. And so it tells us that the productive capacity of the economy increases by 50%. And that just means that our GDP is going to increase by 50%. Now, if we were at 4 trillion before, then 50% is half of that, which is 2 trillion. So if we increase by 2 trillion, we now have a supply, long-run aggregate supply curve that's going to be over at 6 trillion rather than 4 trillion, because we've increased our capacity to produce, or our supply, by now 50%, or 2 trillion. So I'm going to go ahead and grab this line tool and draw our new long-run aggregate supply curve. So it's just going to be vertical, which the long-run aggregate supply curve always is. And it's going to be, so it'll be parallel to the previous one, but now it is at 6 trillion instead of 4 trillion because it's increased by 50%. So that's the first part, where the economy, the productive capacity of the economy increases by 50%. So that increases our supply curve because the suppliers are the producers. So when we increase productive capacity, we increase supply, or shift it to the right. So the second part of it says that at the same time, the money supply increases at the same rate. When money supply increases, it increases demand. We can think about this as the people in the economy, the demanders, the consumers now have more money, so they can then demand more stuff. So if it increases at the same rate, that means that now our aggregate demand curve, we know that when it increases, it's going to stay parallel to the old one, right? So it's still going to be a line that looks downward sloping at the same slope. But knowing that it increases at the same rate means that at the same price level of 100, we're going to cross the long-run aggregate supply. So if it increased at a different rate, then we would cross at a different price level here. But since the money supply increases at the same rate as the productive capacity, it means we're going to keep our same price level. So that's how we know where this line is going to be. So it's going to cross long-run aggregate supply again at 100. So I'm going to try to put this dot on here at the right place. And we want this curve to be something like this. this. Okay, so we want it to be parallel to the old one, and we want it still to cross the long run aggregate supply right at that point, or the 100 point. And that we just know because it tells us it increases at the same rate. Anytime you increase at the same rate, your price level is going to stay the same. And you can read more about that in your textbook. If you look at figure 10-6 on page 232 of the textbook, you can see this illustrated there. So this is our new demand curve, aggregate demand curve. And we know that the aggregate demand curve shifts out because the money supply increases. Okay, so now we have shown our effect on the economy. We've shown that the long run aggregate supply shifts out and also that the aggregate demand shifts out. So we've done number 1. Number 2 tells us to use the point drawing tool to show the new equilibrium price level and output. So again, the equilibrium here is just like it always has been. It's wherever the supply and demand curves cross. So our new demand curve crosses our new supply curve right here. So here I'm going to drag this out so that it doesn't overlap with things and make my econ lab freak out. And I'm going to say that's my second equilibrium. And save. And looks good. So if you have any more questions about this, feel free to stop by office hours or shoot me an email.